And I'm the founder and CEO of the Universal Women's Network Women of Inspiration Awards, and this is the Women of Inspiration podcast. We are interviewing women of inspiration who are inspiring others to lead by example, to ignore the naysayers, and are making an impact locally, nationally, and globally. So my guest today is the amazing 2019 Woman of Inspiration Advocate and Catalyst for Change, Marnie Grundman. Marnie, you're joining us here from Toronto. You are a inspirational, motivational speaker. You are a best-selling author. You are an advocate for, I'll let you talk about that. You do so much work in the community for homelessness, raising the awareness for human trafficking, against it. So we're dying to know your story. And so I think that in the green room, we were talking about, the time of this interview, how critical it was, because right now people are fearful. They're feeling overwhelmed about the uncertainty of everything. I just want to actually get the date on record right now. Like, it's Sunday. What day is it? I lost track. March 29th, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so everything, the world, we're experiencing a historical time in our life. This has never happened, where businesses are closed, airlines, borders been shut down, like everybody's working from home around the world. Like, this is unprecedented. So, there's lots of people that are trying to, figure out their new norm. And there's nothing better than to look for inspiration through people that have gone through great adversity. I think that is super, super key, knowing that you can get through the other side. So thank you for sharing your personal journey with us today. And I want to start with, I want to go back to, the young lady, the little girl that was lost. And, so wherever you'd like to start that journey, I think let's dive in.
Well, first of all, I just want to say, in adjusting to our new norm, I think we all need to remember this is our new temporary norm. This is going to pass, like all things do, right? And I draw that from my childhood, from those experiences. I grew up in a very dysfunctional and abusive home. I say grew up. I grew up until the age of 13 in that home. There was everything from psychological to physical to sexual abuse going on. And by the time I was 13, I ended up living on the streets. I started running away at an extremely young age. And most kids who run, they run several times before it finally sticks. And so for me, that's what happened. And I ended up growing myself up the rest of the way, living on the streets from 13 to 14 and a half. I was trafficked for labor. I went through every experience that any child living on the streets, or even any adult homeless person without shelter, would go through. And as we're in these times right now, obviously that's an even bigger concern than it normally is.
So let me ask you something about, do you remember those times vividly at 13 years old? Do you remember, lying your head to sleep? Where did you sleep?
Oh, I definitely remember. I have pockets, I should say. Some of the daily life is gone. And that's a byproduct of a traumatic experience. I remember sleeping in abandoned buildings, and I would sleep upright near a window or a door, near some place where I can get out. And I wouldn't lay my head down. I was ready to leave at any moment in case somebody came in and either, wanted to mess with me in some way or kick me out in general. I remember sleeping on park benches. I remember not having any food for days. One of the lowest points for me, I was living in an apartment complex sauna. And what's interesting about this lowest point is it also became my highest point.
Mm.
It was cold. I didn't know how to work the sauna. I was afraid to make noise because somebody might come and discover me and kick me out. It was the only shelter I had at the time, and I was feeling particularly vulnerable and alone for whatever reason in that moment. And I remember thinking, sadly, like I look back now, it's a sad thought, but it was the thought that got me through. And that was, I was paying up front. I was like paying my dues up front for a better life that lay ahead. And it's really a big part of what just kept me pushing forward, is just knowing that that was temporary and things had to get better, and they were going to get better.
So, I can't even imagine the mental strength
Yeah.
that you had. And, people often wonder, how am I going to really make it through? And so I believe that we have, each and every one of us has that mental strength, but you only tap into it when you absolutely need to tap into it. And it's like your superhuman power and your cape come on, and you're the bravest, strongest person that you could have ever imagined. Like, you're like, wow, where did this come from? So what was that for you? Like, how did that mental, like, can you describe that feeling? Because I know I have my own, but I'm curious
Yeah.
about, where did you go in your head to get to there?
It's something that I had at a really young age. I think it was how I survived when I was in abusive situations. So what it looked like to me was not focusing on what was happening in that moment, or where I was in that moment, or what I didn't have in that moment. And it's the same mindset I have now. I choose to focus on what's going to work for me instead of succumb to what isn't working for me. And every single one of us has the ability to do that. It's a mind management thing. We choose what we give our energy to. And for whatever reason, as a small child, that's where my brain naturally went. I guess it's just your survival instinct, right?
Very interesting. So, I think what's so powerful about your story is that, my goodness, I can't even imagine, one night, and when you're 13 and 14, a young woman, like, we have these things called periods happening, like, how did you handle puberty? I know that's kind of a weird question, but I'm like going,
No, but
it's not the same for, like, girls are way different. We've got all these other things that happen to us all the time. Like, oh my God, like, it's like 10 times worse.
Yeah. Well,
100 times worse.
It's a miracle that I didn't end up becoming very ill because of just, sanitary conditions. And you think about people that are out there now, and the products that we all take for granted that we have, and the comforts and things like that. I mean, I didn't have, if you have money, what are you going to do? Are you going to eat, or are you going to go buy, a box of tampons? I mean, it's pretty much a no-brainer. So what I did, and what people out there now do, and what kids I knew did, you make products on your own out of, toilet paper, paper towels, whatever you can find, and you do the best that you can. And, finding public bathrooms or places that you don't get kicked out of so that you can get yourself clean. It was a huge challenge, and it's still a challenge. I think you might be aware, like at Christmas time, I have a street team. We go out together and we give out necessities to people who are experiencing homelessness. That's one of the things that we give. But another thing we give are gift cards so that they can have restaurant access, get a meal, and also have bathroom access. It's those little things that nobody thinks about. And when you think about a kid on the streets and think about why they're there, you have to remember that that child was so desperate to survive that having a home with a bathroom and a refrigerator was secondary to getting out.
And that is really powerful.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just absorbing, like, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, and my heart is breaking. it's literally breaking. And I did see the video, how you went out, and I think you had the little Santa hats on and just these simple bags full of products for people. And it's just so heartwarming to see that those really kind gestures life-changing for people.
Yeah, life-changing. A moment's attention, you just don't know where they're, you never know any person where they are in their experience. So a moment that you're kind can make such a huge impact, and especially for somebody who is in such dire need of human contact, let alone food or any other products, right?
So let me ask you something. So 13, 14, you celebrated a birthday. Do you remember your birthday?
Not at all. Not even a little bit.
I think we have to have a party celebration, go back and celebrate that huge, huge pivotal time in your life, which now has become a platform so you can help others.
I literally don't remember any of my birthdays on the streets. One of the bigger losses for me is photographs. I lost all those years and have no pictures of myself during that time. And that sounds like a little thing, but it's not a little thing. It's another loss to an experience where you're losing so much.
Yeah, that takes me back to 2007, and the things that were most important to me when my life turned upside down were the pictures. And that's the only thing that I really made sure that I had with my son when he was a baby at 7 months, was I made sure that we had pictures of us together, and we looked really happy and it looked like nothing was going on, but it's that memory, right? So wow, I think that for people watching, I think that's really important, that these are the small things that seem insignificant, that we have to just make sure that we capture those moments, we embrace them, and think about how we can help serve others.
Yeah.
So what was the turning point for you?
Having a baby.
Okay, so let's hold on a sec. So let's talk about that. So there was some street romance. Was it street romance, or was it a tragedy?
So it wasn't really a street romance, because at that point I had a job. I was off the streets. Actually, I had 2 jobs. I was working in a shoe store and a pinball arcade. I was 16. All this time I was lying about my age, because obviously to get a job you can't be honest about your age. And I met somebody who at the time, I think he was 26 or 27, and we ended up living together, and I became pregnant. He didn't want the baby. So I left, because I felt that he was going to pressure me to have an abortion. Not only did I feel that, he was. And when I had my daughter, my eldest daughter, like, everything changed for me. Initially I wanted to have a baby because I wanted somebody to love me, which is a pretty common thing for a teenager, I think, when they are in that situation, and in the situation I was in particular, because you're alone. And then as it turned out, it made me have to be better for her. And because I had to be better for her, I had to put my life together in a more responsible way, I guess. Although obviously I'd been being responsible because I grew myself up, but it was different. It was a very different mindset from that point on.
And as a single mom, I know all the challenges that come with that. And it's a whole new level of mental toughness that you have to adapt, because you just are in survival mode constantly.
Yeah.
So I've just got to ask this question. Did you all of a sudden were like, now I'm like a single mom, are people going to react to me differently?
Sure.
Right.
Well, so it's kind of a longer drawn out story, but when I had my daughter, social services reported me to my mother. So I had to go back home. So everything I'd been running from, and coming back home, 17 with a baby, and our community was not very accepting. You know, our community was, it's almost like it took 100 men to make me have one baby. That's how I was treated. And on top of that, I was the kid who ran away. So everything was my fault. Everything was my burden to carry. There was, you know, the presentation by my mother was like I was basically worthless. And I believed that already because of how I was raised and because of living on the streets. So it was a very, very challenging time because I didn't have enough love for myself to do what I needed to do for me. And that's why my daughter Jade was such a turning point, because I loved her enough to do it for her. It took me a long, long, long time to turn that thought process around and to actually begin to realize that I wasn't bad and I wasn't damaged and all of those things that go along with growing up as a child of abuse. You know, your self-esteem is completely eradicated.
So how lucky is your daughter to have a mom that is so powerful and strong and so resilient?
Yeah, most of the time I think she thinks so. I'm kidding.
And so you're actually a grandma now too, right? So
I have 3 kids and 2 grandkids. Yeah.
amazing.
And everyone's doing really well. And I ended up, even though I was sent back to my mother's family, that side of the family, I ended up walking away from my mother. And as a part of that, everybody picked sides and nobody took mine, or very few people. I have a couple of people now, but for the most part, nobody took my side or took up for me. But it's a decision I had to make to break the cycle and to make sure that my children didn't grow up with that same dysfunction. And you know, none of us are perfect parents and we carry some of it through. But for the most part, I did break the cycle. And I see it in my daughter's parenting of her children. And I see it in who my kids are just as human beings. The self-esteem, they have that sense of self-love, and that they can do anything and that they're good humans, kind of thing, you know?
So there's such a great long story, and you know, I'm excited for you to actually be able to share it in person in Toronto in the fall at the Success Summit. And we'll talk more about some of those experiences. But now I want to sort of talk about sort of, you know, how the strength that it took actually to come out and be vulnerable about your story, because you've gone through tragedy, you've fought your way through, and now you're sharing and you're open and you're vulnerable, because the whole world that probably was in your circle then had no idea of how traumatic your childhood and the struggles that you had to overcome. So what was that? That's another turning point, is it not?
Oh, it was a huge turning point, and it was terrifying. You know, because if somebody said to me, oh, where'd you go to school? Like, I'd leave out the part where I lived on the streets, you know, kind of thing. Nobody knew. You're spot on. I lived a compartmentalized life. Like, that was in a drawer, and very, very, very few people got access to that drawer, not because I was private, but because I was ashamed. And because I was afraid of the judgment. And telling my story and finally making that decision obviously was life-changing, but it's also, I'm so much lighter now. I don't worry about what people think, and on the contrary, they're not judging. They're like, wow, which is not something I would have ever expected. I had no idea what the outcome was going to be. And my sharing of my story was really to help other kids and adults who were recovering from the streets, because I didn't have a resource. That was the whole reason I did it. And then it turned into this, well, here I am now talking to you and touching people's lives in a way that makes sense out of a bad experience for me. Like, taking something and doing something constructive with it is really important. And it's just freeing. It's changed my life on every front, in terms of just not being afraid to express myself and have my voice and feel peaceful. I feel really peaceful, which is pretty amazing.
You sound very calm and very peaceful right now. I mean, today is, when was the World Health Organization? March 11th was the date that they announced that we're experiencing a global pandemic. We are only at March 29th now.
Yeah.
And look at everything that's happened, and you have this aura of just chill and peace. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, Marnie, is because it's just like steady, chill, peace, you've got this. And everybody's capable of that, right? Is getting through the other side.
And some of it, for people who are having a hard time, if you can focus on what you do have and what's positive about right now, that's going to help get you through. When you look at the rest of the world, I can't remember what country it was, but they were, I think they were shooting rubber bullets or something at people in the streets to clear the streets. Like, look where we are, look where we live, look that you have relationships with people that we can talk online. Imagine that if this happened at a time where all we had was like a regular phone, you know what I mean? This is such a higher level of connectivity that we have. If you can focus on what you do have and what's working and what's good, it's going to help you get through it. And remember, we're all in the same boat. I mean, different people are having maybe different issues that they're dealing with, but we're all in the same boat, and we have a roof over our head if nothing else. And that's what works for me. That's why, like, for me, I just think, well, I've been in worse circumstances. I'm in my apartment, I'm warm, I have food, like, I'm good. This will pass.
And I think that you mentioned something very specific that I related to, and as I'm experiencing this with everyone, just like yourself, we're experiencing it together. When you go through adversity, like you've been through, like I've been through, it's so personal.
Yeah.
Where nobody else is experiencing that adversity. You are on your own right now. I mean, let's just say that if you are needing to talk or reaching out for support, everybody's expecting, offering help, offering support, offering guidance. But think back to those times on the street. You had to keep that in.
Yeah.
I had to keep, I'm still battling with stuff, right? Yeah. And I don't talk about it. But it's almost, it's if everybody can just think about right now that we're so in it together, and that's the beautiful piece of it, is that the whole world is in this together, and that's powerful. So I talk about the other side. So I think where I'd like to have you share some of the incredible things that you've done with everybody, because I've got a couple things that I want to answer, but I'll let you start with, how about that little award right there?
I love this award.
So 2019 Woman of Inspiration, Advocate and Catalyst for Change. And I could not, you are such an inspiring woman that is making an impact, like, globally. Like, so maybe share with all the listeners and the viewers, just give them a little sneak peek of that beautiful other side to your adversity.
Well, yeah, this is the other side. Because I'm able to share my story, I'm able to bring attention to things that matter to me, to help prevent other kids from ending up on the streets, to help draw attention to the fact that we need to protect those kids who do end up on the streets from trafficking in order to help end human trafficking. Part of the way that we need to attack that is by ending the supply of the victims and creating more damage. I'm able to advocate for Covenant House, which is the largest, oldest homeless youth organization in North and Latin America. And I've been honored to be on their committee for the last 4 years and be able to raise tens of thousands of dollars for them and help create partnerships that keep those kids not just housed, but healing. You know, they provide an actual family unit for these kids, which is something that I didn't have. I'm able to draw attention to issues that we have regarding kids who are disappearing from foster care, and nobody's reporting them missing and nobody's looking for them. So my very negative experience, fortunately, has a place now where I'm able to create change. Some of it is small and I don't see it. Some of it is a little bit bigger. There was a woman who told me, because of my sharing my story, every day on the way to work, she feeds somebody and she asks them what they would like to eat, and she goes to get them food. And now everyone in her office is doing it. You know, each and every one of us can do something to create positive change. You don't have to go through what I went through or what you've gone through. You don't have to go through a negative experience to be a catalyst for change, right?
So tell me, you know, I see the book in the back end piece there. So maybe I would love you to share a little bit about your book called Missing, and sort of just share with everybody a little bit about the book that you wrote.
So this is where it all started. I initially started to write the book because I wanted there to be a resource for people who were recovering runaways, and for kids who were going through different issues. And as I started to write it and people would ask me what the book was about, and I would tell them it was about a runaway, I would get this change in body language that would happen. The judgment would start to come out. And I quickly realized that people still, in this day and age, with all of the access we have to psychology and the awareness of abuse, still look at these kids as being troublemakers. So I changed how I addressed that, and I said I was writing about a missing child because that's what I was. And it softened people and made me realize that another part of the book was meant to sensitize people to what these kids are going through. And then the final part is about overcoming adversity, as we've talked about, and how, I mean, we're just so resilient. Literally, there is nothing that you can't survive. It may not be easy and you do have to put in the work, but it's very, very worth it. You know, it's always worth hanging on another day and just pushing through, because you never know what that new day is going to bring, right?
So what are your most interesting projects that you've had a hand to participate in?
I think that really there's two. The two most interesting projects for me, one has been the Women Unite Sleep Out that several of the Covenant houses do, and we started ours 4 years ago. And that's just been a phenomenal experience. It's not just the raising of the money, it's having people come in and sleep out for the night and tour the house and see what they're doing. Because, you know, our support and our doing that means that those doors stay open, and they serve, just this one house in Toronto serves 350 kids a day, not to mention the kids who are in the human trafficking houses and the house for LGBTQ. I mean, they have a lot of different projects. So that's been a huge, huge thing for me. And then the other one is, I love my Christmas project. I love putting together the team and everybody coming together and donating and coming out and actually giving out the gifts and the interaction that comes from that. It's just, like the year before last, we had 30 bags, and this last year we had 50 duffel bags on wheels. So we had a more permanent packaging that people could put their belongings that they had. And so next year I want it to be like 200, you know? So I see this as a really growing thing, and it's so far my favorite project.
Very exciting. I know that, you know, the sleep out, I had said, I'm there. Yes. What date is that? And no, what date was that supposed to happen?
That was May 22nd, and we don't have a new date yet, but I will let you know.
Do. because I said, sign me up.
Yeah.
I want to experience this.
Yeah,
I want to
and
experience
you'll
it.
love it. It's just incredible. It's an incredible experience. Most people who do it come back year after year. So it's been really, really successful.
So, you know, what could people do? I mean, there's always somebody that's in a worse position than we are.
Yep.
And that's what we have to think about. You know, if we're low, there's always, that would be a treat for someone to be in your shoes right now. So, you know, there's lots of people affected by this. And you said we're lucky to have a house, a roof over ourselves right now. So what is your, you know, the vibe right now in Toronto with, especially, you know, everybody stay home? What about the people that don't have homes? What's happening in Toronto?
I know that there's a struggle to get people in shelters, and the problem, of course, for shelters is what happens with the social distancing. My focus is a lot, obviously, is on kids, and Covenant House is doing the best they can to service the kids, even the kids who are coming to drop in, and it's definitely a very stressful situation. Some of the things that are being done, there's an organization called Feed It Forward, and the guy who runs that just fed like 30,000 people in Toronto, like did 30,000 meals in the last few days. We weren't addressing this problem before, and I don't think we're doing that much better at it now, but I know there's some really great people who are trying. We need to house these people. You know, hotels are closed. There are rooms available where they could be kept in an isolated situation while we figure out who's sick and who isn't. And I just don't understand why more isn't being done.
So that actually crossed my mind because hotels are closed.
Yeah.
And they've got toilets, they've got beds.
How to deal. Yeah.
Their access to food. So can't we do like,
yeah,
I
mean,
mean,
it's
too
not
forward thinking, or is there too many?
Well, I think, you know, if you can run a shelter, you can run something like that. I'm not saying it's an easy fix, obviously, because you have people who, some of them, they have all their faculties and they're unsheltered. And then you have some people who, you know, might have drug problems. You have other people who may have severe mental health issues. So I'm not saying that it's an easy thing to do, but it's something we have to do. We have to figure something out. I know one of the states, I can't remember which one right now, which I guess it's irrelevant, but they set up tents and everybody has an individual tent, and they're in a massive field and they've got everything set up for them, and that way they can be isolated. They have food to eat. You know, they're not, they have the social distancing. So if you can do that in a field with a bunch of tents, it seems to me you'd be able to do it, you know, watching floor by floor or something like that. So, you know, time's going to tell how that's being handled. You know, the people who are unsheltered are also coming in contact with sheltered people. So if we don't care enough about them, which we should, and obviously, you know, I do, then think about it. If you have to selfishly, you're passing those people on the street. They're buying food, you know, when they have loose change or whatever, they have access to some services. So if we don't take care of them, it's the same problem as everybody else. You know?
So I'm just, this has been such a great conversation, and I'm really happy that we had the opportunity to talk. And I hope that, you know, for those that are watching on the lives that are going on right now, and also when this is produced under the Woman of Inspiration podcast, you know, with video and then actually just audio on the audio, I hope that people will, if they want to find out more about the work that you're doing, it's marniegrundman.com, and that's, I have to look at my notes to make sure I spell it out right. So MARNIE Grundman, GRUNDMAN.com, to learn more how you can make a difference in your own community. Marnie, you're an amazing woman, and so giving and so kind with your generous with your knowledge, and also just your time. So I really just want to say thank you for that. Now, I always end up, going back to asking our women of inspiration, who inspires you?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. The kids that make it out on the other side inspire me. The kids that I come in contact with at Covenant House, they're the ones who inspire me.
And you inspire them. There's that circle of reciprocity that is so, so important. So everyone, did I miss anything? Is there anything that you would love to share or to share with the listeners right now? I mean, I have a feeling that this podcast, these interviews that are happening right now, are going to be listened to, watched, reviewed, because there's so much really, really great information. And I think it's going to help and serve so many people when they're going through what they're going through, and whatever stage that is, until we can get back to, kind of being out in our jobs and moving forward, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be essential to listen to some stories that are inspiring you to go, you got this.
Yeah, I think, the only thing that I always want to leave people with is just be kind, take a moment, and you never know what somebody's going through. So just take a moment and be kind.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Marnie. This is the Woman of Inspiration podcast, and we were speaking with Marnie Grundman. She is an author. She is a motivational speaker, an inspiring speaker. She is an advocate and catalyst for change. 2019 Woman of Inspiration. Marnie, you're a mom, you're a grandma. You are making such a big impact in the world. So thank you so much for sharing your time, and what a gift you are.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.